Although there's some new faces on South Carolina's football team and also some question marks, Shane Beamer's culture could very well be the difference for his team in 2023.
You are Locked On Gamecocks, your daily podcast on the South Carolina Gamecocks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, Gamecock Nation, and welcome back to the Locked On Gamecocks podcast. I'm Andrew Line, the host of this podcast, and you can find my written work over on Gamecocks Digest on SI.com. Thank you for making the Locked On Gamecocks podcast your first listen or watch for your team every day. We are free and available both on YouTube and wherever you get your audio podcasts daily. Today's show is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. That's why LinkedIn Jobs helps find the right people for your team faster and for free. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Terms and conditions do apply. South Carolina opened up their practice on Monday afternoon for some of us media members to be able to go out there and sort of see what all is going on with the team. And as I mentioned, when the Gamecocks had their first practice open this past Friday, we usually aren't able to glean a whole lot from some of these practices, but every once in a while, there's a practice that comes around where there's a lot to take away from it. And that's what happened on Monday afternoon, especially when it comes to the signals of Shane Beamer's culture working in full force, because this is a team that does have a ton of new faces, and some of those guys, they're going to be heavily relied on this year. But I feel like that the culture Shane Beamer has instilled into this program, it could help South Carolina exceed national expectations once again in 2023. And yesterday's practice, in my opinion, it encapsulated that feeling to the nth degree for multiple different reasons. Firstly, the energy at Monday's practice was extremely high on both sides of the ball. Now, some people would turn around and they would say something to the effect of, maybe you hope, of course, the team has good energy, or maybe that, every single team, they have reports that are coming out at camp. They're saying the energy is good here at fall camp. But South Carolina's practice on Monday, it just felt a little bit different because of the fact that there was an abundance of factors that usually when combined together, it doesn't lead to a very efficient practice. And some of those factors were as follows. It was the team's fourth straight practice of fall camp. This is just the team's second practice, I believe, in shoulder pads. The temperature during South Carolina's practice on Monday was legitimately in the upper 90s, and it probably felt like it was well over 100 degrees, especially to the guys out there wearing shoulder pads and jerseys and the like. And typically, when you have all of those factors combined in one practice, very rarely does that practice go well, especially when you're talking about, again, early on in fall camp. It's why fall camp is 3 to 4 weeks long and not 1 to 2 weeks, because there's always kinks that coaching staffs find that they need to work out. They don't have perfect practices from the very beginning of fall camp all the way to the end. There's some down days where the team just kind of needs to regroup the very next day. That's why fall camp is what it is. But it didn't feel that way on Monday, despite everything that I just mentioned. Even from the warm-ups all the way to the team period, it did not feel like that South Carolina's energy was low. And I relate that in part back to the culture that Shane Beamer has instilled into this program, which is all about competition. And that's what we're getting ready to get into with this next point that I have, which is the fact that some of the coaches during this 11-on-11 team work between the offenses and defenses, they were getting into it. Lonnie Teasley and Sterling Lucas, they got into a shouting match at one point after a play had concluded. I unfortunately don't have any footage of that. I think I cut my video short right before it all went down. But, some people, they might worry about that because of the fact that two coaches are going after each other. Again, don't take it other than it's just strictly competition between multiple coaches. And in my opinion, it's, again, a positive sign of the culture that Shane Beamer has put into this program, because when coaches are doing that, like, it's one thing when players do it, again, especially when it's about 100 degrees. Sometimes you just get a little bit fed up with some of the little things that some of the other guys do, etc. But when coaches go at each other, to me, that's a sign of a coaching staff that's bought in. It's a sign of coaches that really and truthfully believe in what they are telling these young kids, in what Shane Beamer is telling them, what he is imparting on them. I think that's something that cannot be forgotten. Now, do you want your coaches obviously going at each other all the time necessarily? Probably not. But again, every so often in a practice like this one, I've got no problem with it. I think it's a good thing overall. Because again, I think it just shows how much that these coaches truly believe in what South Carolina is building here. And then the last point that I want to talk about real quick is the one-on-one play between Joshua Simon and Jaylon Kilgore. Now, I was going to try to pull up the video for those of you watching on YouTube and, of course, explain it in detail to all of you on audio podcast. But unfortunately, the video, the quality was terrible, honestly. So I'm just going to explain it to you all real quick. So there were some one-on-ones that took place in the red zone. And one of those one-on-ones involved Joshua Simon going up against Jaylon Kilgore on a fade route. Now, Joshua Simon, he ran a good fade route. Jaylon Kilgore, for a true freshman, going up against a guy that has played in college for like 4 or 5 years, he did a great job in this rep. He was right there, attached to Joshua Simon's hip all the way to the end. He had great coverage. He stayed in front of him. He got his hand up, but Spencer Rattler threw it up only where Joshua Simon could get it. He jumped up and caught the ball in the end zone, held onto the ball, went falling to the ground, and the entire offense proceeded to just mob Joshua Simon for his catch in the end zone. When I say the entire offense, I mean like everybody just came running through the end zone to just basically just dogpile on him just about and just hype up their teammate, in all honesty. So that was really cool to see, and I think it's really telling the fact that, look, Joshua Simon, this is not a guy that's been in the program for like 3, 4, 5 years now. This is a guy that's only been here for about 7 months now. And for Joshua Simon, and obviously when you make a good play like that, you're going to get some kind of response from your teammates. But to have almost the entire offense come up running to you like they all did with Joshua Simon on that one-on-one play, I think that obviously says a lot about the kind of player that the Gamecocks brought in with Joshua Simon on a personal level. But again, I just also think that it tells you how much this team, in this case, is close with one another. Which, again, sometimes that sounds cliche. Sometimes it's not sexy to talk about those qualities of a football program, but they are important qualities nonetheless. And then the thing about Jaylon Kilgore, he played that rep so well. And unfortunately for him, the quarterback and wide receiver were just a little bit better on that one play. Despite that, he had some teammates on the defensive side of the ball who came up to him and, I guess kind of made sure that he kept his head up after that rep because, again, obviously for one, it's practice, but two, Jaylon Kilgore is a freshman. And that's the other thing I want to note here. They put a true freshman safety, who, yes, has been here since January, but they put up Jaylon Kilgore against one of the most experienced players on the offensive side of the ball, in Joshua Simon. Also a guy that probably has him by like 20, 30 pounds and at least probably 3, 4 inches. And they put Kilgore out there to see what he could do. That, in my opinion, says a ton about what the coaching staff thinks about Jaylon Kilgore. And he almost made the play. He almost made the play. He did everything right. So that one play alone, in my opinion, displayed just how good this team period was in Monday's practice for South Carolina. But when you look at the big picture, I think it just really shows how much this culture that Shane Beamer, again, has spent the last 2-3 years now trying to instill into this program, how much it's had an effect on his team. From him all the way down to the players, coaching staff, everybody. And yes, there are a lot of new starters. There are definitely some question marks in the trenches that have to be answered by this team. But if there's something that could help this team exceed expectations once again, 3 years in a row, it could be the culture. Something that, again, you can't put a number next to it. And so for that reason, a lot of times, it gets kind of brushed to the side. From what I saw at Monday's practice, we shouldn't be doing that going into this season. I probably need to do a better job of factoring that in. So that was my main takeaway from practice on Monday. But don't worry, that's not the only thing that I'm going to talk about. I got plenty more to discuss regarding some notable appearances in this team period. Some guys that appeared maybe on the first string or second string, and even one guy that appeared on third string that should not go unnoticed. We're going to touch on all of that in just a couple moments right here on Locked On Gamecocks. Today's show is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. As a small business owner, you always want to make sure that you have access to the most qualified candidates that are looking to work in your field. And this can apply to every single small business out there, whether you're involved in warehousing and storage, maybe you're involved in transportation, or maybe you're a small retail business. Either way, if you are struggling to find the right people for your small business, then you need to check out LinkedIn Jobs. Just add your job and the purple hashtag hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile to spread the word that you are hiring, and utilize tools like screening questions to filter through the candidates. Because LinkedIn Jobs will help you find the qualified candidates that you want to talk to and hire faster and for free. Post your job at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job once again for free today. Terms and conditions do apply. Welcome back to this Tuesday edition of the Locked On Gamecocks podcast, where we cover your South Carolina Gamecocks every single day in just 30 minutes. For all of you everydayers, thank you once again for making the Locked On Gamecocks podcast your daily choice for South Carolina Gamecock sports coverage. Be sure to stay tuned in to the Locked On Gamecocks podcast throughout the week, because at some point this week, I'm going to talk about Shane Beamer's career, how people might look back on it, and whether or not his career outlook could depend on how he does compared to Josh Heupel. We're going to touch on that subject at some point down the line this week right here on the Locked On Gamecocks podcast. But getting back to what we're discussing on today's show, let's talk about some more notable observations that I had from Monday's practice. The first one relating to South Carolina's freshman quarterback in LaNorris Sellers, because right now it seems like LaNorris Sellers has taken the number 3 spot on South Carolina's depth chart at the quarterback position. When the Gamecocks had their team period on Monday afternoon, LaNorris Sellers took all of the reps with the third team offensive unit. This tells me one thing specifically, that the only thing that might be holding the LaNorris Sellers back from progressing even further, from rising up the depth chart even more right now, might be the knowledge of the playbook. Again, Luke Doty, he's going to his 4th year of college football. He's not going to give up that backup spot very easily. Spencer Rattler, yes, he has only been here for now 1 year and is going into his 2nd year here in Columbia. But you know that Spencer Rattler has been working his tail off to really learn this offense under Dow Loggins. One that is still similar to the offense that he already was operating in last year. So right now, LaNorris Sellers, unless he is just absolutely killing it in practice, he might not rise very much higher on this depth chart, but I think it's still notable that he's already seemed to become the 3rd string quarterback on this roster. Another takeaway that I had, Jordan Stratton. I've already mentioned him before, but I got to talk about him again today, because he really does look like he's on the verge of being 100%. I'm not going to dare say he is 100%, because I certainly would not know that, but Jordan Stratton, the thing that stuck out to me, he took first team reps at the edge rusher position when that 11-on-11 team drill was being run, when all those plays were being run between both the offense and defense at Monday's practice. I think that's a big deal. Even though they are thud tackling, even though maybe the linemen are not always going just 100% right at each other, I think that the fact that Jordan Strachan is going through at least a decent amount of contact and he's able to handle the stress and the pressure of that right now, I think it says a lot about where he's at with his rehab and just how comfortable he is with that surgically repaired ACL in that knee. Mo Kappa, for comparison, he was not taking reps in the team drills on Monday. That's not to say that he's, of course, in a bad spot. He could very well be back by week 1 or maybe a little bit later after that. But that's just to give you an idea of just how far ahead it seems like Jordan Strachan is when it comes to his recovery from that torn ACL this past year. Tyshawn Wanamaker. We've talked about that right tackle position a good amount on this show. Offensive line in general. In the first practice this past Friday, Sidney Fugar, he was the guy that was taking the first team reps at right tackle when it came to individual and position group work. And also when the team ran out there and did some plays against air, the offense, I should say. On Monday, Tyshawn Wanamaker was taking the first team reps at right tackle. I think that's great because I think that means Tyshawn Wanamaker responded appropriately to the fact that he basically was not the starter to start out camp. And I think that also means that there's some good, healthy competition going on at that spot. And coaches want that, and fans should want that because, again, this statement is just hammered away by coaches every single year. But competition is good for development. Competition is great. When you've got multiple guys that are fighting for a particular spot, there's so many positives that can come out of that. And as much as people get tired of hearing that, it is the truth. So Tyshawn Wanamaker already taking back the first team reps at right tackle. I think that's notable, and I will certainly still be watching that as camp goes on. David Spalding was running with the first team at nickel corner. Again, I think that's notable because David Spalding, he's been dealing with a lot of injury issues for the past year. And it was to a point where there were some questions about, hey, maybe there's a competition there at that nickel corner spot. David Spalding, based on the team portion of practice that we saw on Monday, that's not the case. And again, I think that's a good thing for South Carolina that David Spalding takes that spot. David Spalding offers some positional versatility in that defensive backfield. So for him to be in that spot, I think that's a good sign for Torian Gray's secondary. One other thing of note, Judge Collier, Rock Hill native, was probably one of the more unsung signees of this past recruiting class, not meant as a slight, just based purely on the rankings and the fanfare. He was running with the second team at outside corner, ahead of Isaiah Norris. Why do I think that's a big deal? Isaiah Norris has been in this program for 3 years now. Judge Collier, again, has only been here like 7 months. And he's already apparently now running with the twos ahead of the veteran. Again, that's not meant to be a shot at Isaiah Norris. This is meant to be a sort of round of applause, I guess, to Judge Collier, who clearly right now is developing really well at that spot. So we'll see if Akari Swain maybe pushes him for that spot, or maybe Emory Floyd at the other outside corner spot on that second string unit on defense. Special teams, some quick notes here. Juice Wells got some reps at kick returner. I thought that was very interesting. No, I don't think he's going to return kicks very much this year. I think that's really truthfully if the worst case scenario happens, some guys go down, and you got to put somebody there. Juice Wells is one of the best players, if not the best player on the team. Why not give him some reps back there? I can understand that completely. Landon Sampson got some reps at punt returner. Now, Landon Sampson had a very quiet first year in Columbia. Quite frankly, did not do a whole lot. And honestly, I talked about this with one of the other beat reporters while we were watching practice. Don't think Landon Sampson physically especially was ready to contribute last year. Especially after, he didn't get there until the summer. I think having a full offseason could be so beneficial for Landon Sampson. He definitely looks like he's put on some good weight, some muscle to his frame. So now he could probably withstand a lot more punishment from SEC defensive backs. Him getting some reps at punt returner is very interesting in my opinion. But again, anything he could do to help out the team, I think, would be a good thing to take some pressure off of guys like Amari Brown and Eddie Lewis and maybe a couple of those other receivers as well. Now, to put a bow on all the discussion we've had regarding how South Carolina's done in fall camp so far on today's show, I want to talk about one specific position group. One group that I haven't talked about a whole lot to this point, I don't think, but a group that I really think is going to thrive in 2023 for multiple different reasons. And that is the defensive tackle position. Y'all, I'm very excited about this position group. I really and truthfully am. Obviously, I've talked about it before. There's a lot of depth here at this spot. You've got guys like Tonka Hemingway and Alex Boogie Huntley who have played many years here. Tonka Hemingway especially has been a big-time contributor for this team in more ways than one. Is a guy that could be an all-SEC type of player for the Gamecocks this upcoming fall. You've got guys behind Boogie Huntley and Tonka Hemingway in Nick Barrett and TJ Sanders. Two kids going into, I want to say now, their third season in Columbia. Two very different players. Nick Barrett is sort of your, I guess, traditional interior defensive lineman that really and truthfully makes his presence felt in rush defense. He's a big kid, but he can move pretty well for his size. And he's somebody that can basically clog up gaps and make life difficult for offensive linemen in terms of trying to get some movement going on the line of scrimmage and try to open up some space for the opposing team's running back. TJ Sanders, he, in my opinion, is basically almost like a carbon copy of Tonka Hemingway. Sanders is a kid that can bump out to the edge position if you really need him to, but they prefer to play him on the interior. He's about the same size as Tonka Hemingway. He's also from the state of South Carolina, was also a multi-sport star in high school. TJ Sanders, he is a really good athlete. He's got a high motor. He's a really smart and well-spoken kid. TJ Sanders, in my opinion, is somebody, he could be the Tonka Hemingway for this year's team. He could be a guy that just breaks out. Now, hopefully that would not happen because maybe someone got hurt in front of him. But TJ Sanders going to this third season, I just think that he could put it all together and show that, hey, I know the guys in front of me are pretty good, but don't forget about me. I think he could have that kind of season for the Gamecocks. And then behind those guys, Xavier McLeod, one of the most highly touted prospects from the 2023 recruiting class. A kid that is a great athlete at this position. Explodes off the line of scrimmage when the ball is snapped. Really violent hands. Diagnoses things in the backfield really, really efficiently. A kid that is not going to have to wait long to get some serious snaps here at South Carolina, in my opinion. But the reason why, just beyond the depth this group has, that I'm so excited is because of Travian Robertson being their position coach. Now, I know that a lot of people love the fact that Travian Robertson's back, but the thing is, most of the people that love the fact he's back, the main reason that they love the fact he's back is because he's a South Carolina alum. And you know something? I can completely understand that. But if you start and end the conversation with that when it comes to Travian Robertson, in my opinion, you're doing him a disservice when it comes to his coaching ability. Watching this group in practice, watching how Travian Robertson interacts with his players, I feel like that this group is going to be so much better this year. The last couple years, one of the underlying storylines with this defense has been, honestly, kind of the underperformance of the defensive front, especially that defensive tackle group. Not to say that everybody played bad, but the problem is the consistency was not there. And in rush defense especially, this group just hasn't been good enough. We have to call it like we see it. It has not been good enough. I really think that it can change this year. Couple reasons relating it back to Travian Robertson. First of all, Travian Robertson, he said at his introductory presser, he is going to coach his guys hard. You are going to play how you practice. He is a full believer in that philosophy, and you clearly see it when you are there and you watch the Gamecocks practice on the field. He'll make the entire group start over individual drills if he feels like the effort's not good enough. He is definitely not afraid to have individual players do a drill over again if they don't perform it to the best of standards. And the thing is, Travian Robertson, he coaches them hard, but he is not, how do I put this? He doesn't just yell at the guys just to yell at them. It's the best way I can say it. He is a teacher. He will give multiple visual examples of what it is he is looking for, whether it is trying to disengage a block, whether it is trying to get an offensive lineman's hands off of your chest, certain hand movements. He will do it with anything. And so, in my opinion, that is going to quickly earn him the respect of his players because, yes, he coaches them hard, but again, he also tries to make sure that they actually are learning something when they're in practice. And the other thing that sticks out to me, being a guy that played defensive line in high school, which, don't be wrong, I'm not saying that makes me an expert, because trust me, I'm not an expert. But when it comes to defensive line play, there are certain things that I feel like that I am more proficient in when it comes to just simple football knowledge. And the thing about the defensive line, the interior defensive line for the past couple years that I've sort of been kind of frustrated with is I've always felt like the interior defensive line was more read and react. In essence, it just felt like it was delayed. It felt like it was taking too long. And by the time the interior defensive linemen saw what all was happening, they were kind of out of the play. That's kind of the way that I've seen it, the best way I can explain it. But Travian Robertson, the things he is going over with the interior D linemen in practice, different types of hand movements, different ways to get guys' hands off of you, create separation so that you can actually go and try to make a play, help out your teammates, and not just basically be space eaters, but truly be disruptors. I feel like SAFCON's interior defensive line has been missing that for a long time now. And I feel like with Travian Robertson now being on the staff, I think you're going to see that come back. I think this interior defensive line is going to make a big difference for this team in 2023. Heck, all the question marks that people have about the edge position, and again, some of them are valid questions, this interior defensive line could help make the difference up in that area. If they can consistently condense the pocket, if they can consistently help out in rush defense, help out these linebackers in this 4-2-5 defense, this interior defensive line, it could be the linchpin to marked improvement on that side of the ball. It really could be. And I feel like I'm seeing that in practice right now. And just watching how those guys work, watching how Travian Robertson works with his guys, y'all, I'm excited about this position group. I'm very excited about this position group. I think that entire group, every single guy can make an impact this year. I don't think it gets talked about enough. I don't think it gets talked about enough with this team. I certainly don't think that the rest of the conference talks about it enough. But in games against teams that maybe don't have the greatest of offensive lines, maybe against like a Tennessee or a Kentucky, maybe against a Texas A&M that had some struggles there last year, could the interior defensive line make a difference in those games? I think so. I absolutely think so. So my point being, I know that everyone talks about Spencer Rattler. I know everyone talks about Juice Wells. And I get it. That's the nature of this sport and how fans talk about their teams. I'm telling you right now, though, watch out for this defensive tackle group. I really think that this entire group is going to surprise a lot of people when this upcoming season gets underway. With that being said, y'all, that's going to do it for today's edition of the Locked On Gamecocks podcast. I hope y'all thoroughly enjoyed today's show, as always. What are your thoughts about Shane Beamer's culture that he's instilled into this program? How much do you think it could make a difference for this specific team in 2023? What are some of your takeaways from what else happened at practice so far to this point? And also, is there a position group that you're keeping your eye on? Maybe a group that we're not talking about a whole lot? Let me know down below in the comments section if you watch today's show on YouTube, or shoot me a direct message on Twitter at @A_SC if you listen to today's show on an audio podcast app. But once again, thank y'all so much for tuning in. Have a great rest of your Tuesday, and I'll be sure to catch y'all on the next show of the Locked On Gamecocks podcast.